Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram, Director of Product Marketing in our VMware Cloud Provider Business Unit. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Fayaz and Rajiv. Let's start with you, Fayaz. Can you give us just an introduction of who you are? Fortanix is on the screen, so we can see you're from Fortanix. Tell us a little bit about Fortanix and what you do in Fortanix.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Rajiv, for having me. So just quick background on me. This is Fayaz Shaparwala. I'm the Chief Product and Strategy Officer for the company. And then what does Fortanix do? So Fortanix is a kind of data-first multi-cloud security company. And our focus is on effectively helping customers, protect the data through its entire lifecycle as it goes from on-prem, hybrid cloud to cloud, and making it very easy for hitting security and compliance.
Excellent, thanks, Fayaz. And Rajiv, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Fayaz. Rajiv Bhardwaj, Vice President here at VMware, responsible for our VMware Cloud Provider Solutions, bringing the innovation for our cloud providers.
Thanks, Rajiv. So today we're going to be discussing sovereign cloud and Fortanix and data security and all of the goodness that we can provide now into our sovereign cloud partners. But before we get to that, let's just quickly discuss some recent news. So on the 27th of April, we made some announcements around sovereign cloud. Rajiv, why don't I start with you? Can you explain what those announcements were and why they're important?
Most definitely. So very excited. We made three key announcements. First is we are expanding our sovereign cloud partnership. We have now expanded the initiative to include 14 providers. If you recall, when we launched Sovereign Cloud Initiative at VMworld 2021 last year, we had 10 providers. So we have expanded the initiative to have 14 cloud providers. So that's the first announcement. So the momentum continues. The second one is we are moving beyond infrastructure to developer and data services. What we mean by that is we are now offering to our sovereign providers the VMware Tanzu application platform and the Tanzu data services portfolio. Tanzu application platform is all about dramatically improving developer productivity. Tanzu application platform brings a rich set of developer services, tooling, and making sure developers can quickly start getting to what they care most is deploying applications. So that's one aspect of developer data services. The other one is Tanzu data services, which is it's a portfolio of data services for on-demand caching, messaging, database software. This is where we bring Greenplum, SQL, Gemfire, RabbitMQ. We bring that portfolio for our sovereign providers. So that's the second aspect of the announcement. And the third one, which is really exciting and which is, we'll talk a little bit more about that today, is bringing our security and object storage solutions from our ecosystem partners. Examples are, integrated self-service S3 compatible object storage from our partner Cloudian. Other one is around ransomware protection. It's top of mind for customers worldwide, especially in sovereign environments. This is where we've partnered with Veeam and Cloudian around object lock technology. And the third one is the topic of today, is around integrated key management services for safeguarding data with our partnership with Fortanix. So to summarize, three key announcements. One is around the continued momentum of VMware Sovereign Cloud Initiative. Now we have 14 partners. Second one is we're moving beyond infrastructure to developer and data services, offering Tanzu application platform and Tanzu data services. And the third one is partnership with our ecosystem partners to bring security and object storage solutions from our ecosystem partners.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear all these really cool announcements. Number one, data services is super important for all of our cloud providers to help their customers on that app modernization journey, and having their ability now to do that in their sovereign cloud, so the customer doesn't actually have to go to a hyperscaler to run a data service is a key differentiator. And also ecosystem partners, they are really another key differentiating, adding that diversity to the portfolio, filling the whole kind of environment with new solutions that cloud providers can monetize. But before we get to Fortanix and the reason why we're having this Feature Friday today around our ecosystem partner Fortanix, Rajiv, can you explain to me what's driving the need for sovereign cloud?
So I think, look, every cloud, right? I mean, privacy, security, compliance is the foundation for all clouds. It's kind of given, it's table stakes, goes without saying. But when we talk about sovereign cloud, it goes beyond that. And what we're seeing is majority of our customers, especially in Europe, in Asia, and in Middle East, very concerned about data being vulnerable when it resides in public clouds. The need for complete jurisdiction control and authority of the data when it resides in a sovereign country. And now with this added geopolitical risk, concern is about, hey, look, my cloud that's managed by a US public cloud provider, it adds more risk to my business, right? So those are some of the things we are seeing above and beyond, privacy, security, compliance. It's about sovereignty. It's about ownership to data and access to data.
Okay. And can you define then who is a sovereign cloud provider? What type of things are critical for a sovereign cloud provider?
The easiest way to look at how do we classify who is a sovereign cloud provider? Easiest way to look at that is a set of attributes, and first and foremost, it's all about ownership. It's about who the ownership has to be by a sovereign entity. Second one is about jurisdiction control, so the need for complete jurisdiction control and authority of the data by the sovereign provider. So only the sovereign provider has complete jurisdiction control. Foreign entity has no access to the data that's owned by the sovereign provider. And then data residency is the fourth one that I would highlight is this is the all data. This is the data, the metadata, the log files, everything stays on sovereign soil. So that would be the fourth one. And the last one, which is often overlooked, is about operations and management, ensuring that the cloud is operated by sovereign citizens with the necessary security clearance, right? So those would be the attributes of a sovereign cloud provider. Just to summarize, it's about ownership, it's about jurisdiction control, it's about foreign entity having no access to the data, it's about data residency, everything staying local, and it's about sovereign citizens owning and operating the sovereign cloud.
Yeah, and Faiz, perhaps you can help me here, which shed some light on the key difference between data residency versus data sovereignty. We hear a lot of the time from some of the hyperscale providers that they are complying with sovereign principles because the data is resident within a region and only touched by hands and eyes, but that's only covering sort of half the bases, isn't it?
Well, that is correct, and it's a very key differentiator, especially with the Schrems 2 law that kind of came out, right? The idea is that, of course, especially around EU, the data has to be within the EU boundaries. So, of course, that means, well, the cloud provider can also be in the EU boundary. So if I'm, as an example, if I'm in Germany and the cloud provider happens to be in Germany, then I am sovereign in a sense, right? But because that can be an American company, it has to go beyond that. And then that also requires that, of course, the data that goes in has to be encrypted, but the customer has to be in control of the keys, right? So even if the US government subpoenaed the cloud provider, they would not be able to give anything up to the customer, right? The data is controlled by the customer. So that is a very, very important distinction.
Yeah, so you've got the kind of residency factor, which is really around the kind of geographic location of where the data is stored. And people have also got to remember, it's not just where the data is stored now, but it's also if there's a disaster. You might be in a hyperscaler who has got a presence in a country, but can you guarantee that your data will stay, in that country if there is a disaster recovery event? Things like that become really important because it's not just where the data is stored, it's also where the data is processed and what data is processed. And then, sovereignty, and, Rajiv, you mentioned it a few times, right? Jurisdictional control, privacy laws, governance structures. These are all very different for each nation. I mean, Germany is different to France, right? They're both in Europe, but they're both very different. So partners will need a lot of capabilities really to deliver a sovereign cloud. Can you kind of dive into, Rajiv, for you, if you could dive into what is the VMware sovereign cloud strategy?
Yeah, so I think VMware strategy, simply put, is to enable VMware-based cloud providers to offer sovereign solutions to government agencies and regulated entities in their local market. And it's all about the power of and. It starts with the VMware cloud stack deployed with sovereign controls, combined with local and national sovereign certifications that the providers bring. Mm-hmm. So it's the power of and. And then as part of our strategy, what we're doing is we're enabling providers to deploy the cloud verified stack, which is the foundation for sovereign clouds, for VMware sovereign clouds, to deliver on some of the key asks from our customers and end customers, and of course, our sovereign providers. It's around data sovereignty and jurisdiction control. We kind of touched on that. Second thing is about data access and integrity. Third is about delivering security and compliance. I mean, that's foundation here. And then it's all about data independence and interop. It's about data freedom. And last but not the least is about innovation and analytics, right? Data innovation analytics. How do we ensure that the government agencies, regulated entities can accelerate their digital transformation, and they can reach to their citizens and deliver a better experience, right? So how do you bring digital transformation, accelerate that much faster? So those are the attributes of how we are enabling our providers. And when we talk about sovereign controls, what are the sovereign controls that we are enabling our providers to build on top of cloud verified stack to address those attributes? They're centered around zero trust security. They're centered around disk and workload encryption for both data at rest and in motion. They are centered around images, catalog of images that are hardened and tested. It's about air gap deployment across regions and zones. And then, of course, right, migration that gives portability. You can move across clouds. And then, of course, right, containers and Kubernetes we talked about Tanzu application platform and Tanzu data services. So those are examples of, capabilities and controls built on top of, cloud verified stack. So these are recommendations. We have design guides on how cloud providers can, start with the cloud verified stack, implement these sovereign controls, layer in their, local/national, certification requirements, and they become VMware sovereign providers. And then, of course, right, as part of that, there's VMware, brand awareness, demand generation, right, and thought leadership for VMware sovereign clouds.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's an important thing here, right? And you've mentioned it's the power of and. It's not just the VMware kind of stack and boom, your sovereign cloud. There's a lot more to the sovereign kind of areas as you've defined. And let's just quickly zoom in. So why is a VMware sovereign cloud the best sovereign cloud? We've got this vSphere platform. It's pretty much deployed in all major enterprises globally. We've got hyperscale presence. We've got 4,000 cloud providers. Then we talk about this thing of data interoperability and the ability to move kind of VMs in between different areas. It provides the ultimate choice, right? Rajiv, what are your thoughts about why a VMware sovereign cloud, particularly VMware?
Yeah. So I think the key one, it starts with at the end of the day, right? It starts with the stack, the software stack, right? It's if you look right, VMware software, the SDDC software is pervasively deployed by our enterprise customers. So it's hardened, it's robust, it's enterprise class, it delivers security, availability. All of that is the foundation. So our cloud providers start with that as the foundation. And you touched on a very important point, which is, look, it's all about freedom. It's about data freedom, right? The ability to move the workloads in and out of any of these cloud providers gives our end customers the flexibility. There's no lock, right? They can move around different types of cloud providers. So that's one advantage. So the number one advantage is, of course, it's the robust foundation stack, right? Availability, security built in, proven. Second one is the mobility. You can move around, right? There is no vendor lock-in. And the third one is, in my mind, right, is what we're bringing is the application modernization platform, enabling our cloud providers to accelerate the digital transformation journey with the Tanzu platform that, again, with all sorts of sovereign controls. So those are the three aspects. And then on top of that, we layer the power of the ecosystem, right? So if it's object storage, we have Cloudian partnership. If it's ransomware protection, it's VM and Cloudian. If it's security and around key management, it's Fortanix, right? So I think we're bringing the entire portfolio of solutions and giving our sovereign providers the flexibility and choice to build sovereign solutions that best meets the needs of the local market.
Yeah, you mentioned some great points there, and just thinking about that interoperability thing and where sovereign and national interest lies. It lies in obviously the growth of a nation, and growth is going to become more and more data centric. So having sovereign clouds within region that are encouraging this, and as you say, Rajiv, like delivering the app modernization strategies to their customers, that's going to enable customers to then start monetizing this data better and provide them the freedom they need. So Faiz, just a quick question for you. Looking at the slide here, zero trust. What does that kind of mean in reality, and how do you think cloud providers should start looking at security as a whole, particularly starting at zero trust?
Zero trust, as you know, is I guess used quite extensively these days by security providers. But the whole idea, the simple way to think about it, that is, we think about it at Fortanix, is how do you disaggregate security from the cloud infrastructure provider, right? So if I'm a customer and if I'm bringing my application or my data into a CSP or a cloud provider, right? Mm-hmm. How do I make sure that if the cloud provider gets compromised or the CSP gets compromised, that I am not compromised, my data is not compromised, my customers are not compromised, right? So that really is the foundation of what zero trust is. That I'm taking my data to a cloud provider or a CSP, but I don't have to trust them, right? There's a trust boundary, right? And of course, that doesn't mean that as a customer doesn't have to secure my assets, but I'm not reliant on the cloud provider. They're providing certain level of trust and I'm providing certain level of trust, right? So effectively, that's kind of the simple way to look at it. And underneath that, there's a whole architecture of things you can do, from endpoint security to IAM and access control and policy. And then, of course, we play in the data security realm, right? So you have to kind of have embedded design in there. But the essence is of zero trust is, that's what it means.
Yeah, it all starts with that principle, doesn't it? And if you think about it, you're running your data, your applications in someone else's environment, someone else's servers. That data is still fundamentally yours and your responsibility. And I think that's the key message around, start with zero trust. That's your starting line. Trust no one, full stop, then build up from there.
Yeah. And why this is so important, and if I can maybe just take another minute, right, is because in the context of sovereign cloud and in general, because today, if I'm a customer building a SaaS on a CSP, right, so I'm running and I'm giving commitments to my customer that I'm protecting their data, right? But I'm running my SaaS on a CSP. And if the CSP gets compromised, and if I get compromised, right, then effectively I've compromised my customers. So how do you guarantee that even if the CSP gets compromised, you will not compromise your customers' data? And that's really, the essence of why you need the sovereignty and why the customer needs to be in control of the data and the keys, etc., right? Versus relying on the underlying infrastructure of CSP. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Rajiv, back to you then. So in addition to kind of data sovereignty, what other sort of key pillars are there and attributes around sovereign cloud?
In addition to data sovereignty, the other attributes of a sovereign cloud are about data access and security. And when you talk about data access and security, it's about making sure the data is always accessible. And you kind of talked about this, having highly available data centers, having DR sites, having backup, having low latency networking, no latency network connectivity between data centers for both synchronous and asynchronous replication, and having a secure private network between segmented and fully isolated between data centers, right? So all those are examples of data access and security. So it's above sovereignty. It's the foundation is access and security, and then it's about data security and compliance. It's about people. It's about processes. It's about compliance. It's about auditing. It's about encryption. And the next one is about data independence and interoperability. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but data freedom, having no lock-in shows up as a key customer ask to our sovereign providers. And data freedom is about being able to move data across clouds. And what I hear consistently is, easiest way to look at this is what the SIM card did to cell phones. My device, I as a consumer can move my device to any provider. I don't change a number. There is no lock-in. That is the model end customers are looking for, and that is the model the providers are looking for. Is complete data independence and interoperability. So that's the other aspect of sovereign clouds. And the last one is around data management and analytics, right? It's again about enabling the government agencies, enabling the regulated entities to accelerate digital transformation so that they are more connected to the citizens. And of course, right, they can deliver better services. So bringing, the application modernization platform, containers, development platform on top of that, the data lakes and data warehouses, data management systems, all those are aspects of, that go above and beyond just sovereignty, right? So again, to summarize, it's access and security, it's security and then compliance, it's independence and interoperability, and of course, it's data management and analytics.
So let's just double click then a little bit into the data security and compliance realm, because that's where we're really going to sort of focus in today. Rajiv, can you just talk us through, there's obviously a lot of scope here for a customer to look at. Can you talk us through some of the aspects of data security and compliance from a sovereign cloud perspective?
Yeah, so I think the big key things here again is if you look at, right, first and foremost, it's all about people and processes, right? I mean that is the most important aspect here. Making sure the right level of controls are who has access to what, and managing the access. So that's one. And then the second one is this is where providers, this is the power of and, right? This is where the providers will provide the right level of certification. So, if it's, for example, right, if it's France, it's SECNA, right, as an example, and then, right, depending on the verticals, right, if it's healthcare, it's HIPAA, and then, of course, right, for EU data, right, it's the SHREDS too, right? So all those certification becomes very important from a compliance perspective. And then there is the auditing, right? Again, annual audits by third-party companies, reporting that, right, who has access to data and and how all the data is being accessed, and through an independent auditing company is an important requirement for security and compliance. Security posture is the next one, right? This is where how do you separate the domains between applications and the data? Provider has what access provider has, what access the customer has. How do we do micro-segmentation so that workloads are separate for different customers? All those are examples of how data security and compliance can be delivered. And then, of course, right, the key one is around encryption. Encryption is all about when data is moving or data at rest, and how do we provide key management? Something that Fayaz kind of talked about briefly is I'm a customer. I go to a provider, whatever happens to the provider, if if the provider gets compromised, but the data is always, customer always is in control of the data. So I think, all those are aspects of, data security and compliance. Again, right, it's about controls, it's about certification, it's about auditing, it's about, encryption, right? So those are the aspects of security and compliance.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. And I think this is, when I think about the totality of what's in, a real sovereign cloud, there's a lot of pieces here. It's not just a data center in a location with some legal aspects tied to it. There's, the auditing, there's the actual hiring people of the national origin, ensuring they're security cleared, perhaps. In some cases, gates and guards are required for, public sector data. And there's a lot of additional data center infrastructure management solutions to ensure secure access, all the physical parameters around the data center before you even get to the virtual world. It's like a huge onion with many, many, many layers to it. And this is obviously a very complicated thing in its totality. But particularly what's complicated for lots of customers to understand and really get to grasp with is compliance, and the need to be compliant and how you measure compliance. And Fayaz, we briefly discussed Schrems 2 and why customers need to ensure their privacy protection, particularly in context with data transfer to the US. But what must they do to kind of ensure compliance?
Yeah, look, I'll speak in general and then in the context of Schrems 2, but to what Rajiv just talked about, right? I think this is where customers and even the CSPs can play a very important role in working with the customers, because it's a layered cake, like you said, right? So one is, of course, at the highest levels, we have to hit the right level of compliances. But the compliances are not just tied to the region you're in, which is, let's say we'll talk about Schrems 2 or GDPR, but also the verticals that you're in, right? So if you're in healthcare and in a region, you have to hit, HIPAA plus something, right? Yeah. So you have to look at that layered cake and then figure out what does that mean to be compliant. How do I have to manage my data? What are my, auditability requirements, right? So anyway, so that's the big picture, right? Now, specifically, just using the example of what happened in Europe, EU, and GDPR was one of the most famous kind of compliances that came out. I think it's now about 10 years old. But in GDPR there was a provision that allowed, it was called Privacy Data Shield or Privacy Shield in short form, that kind of allowed you to transfer data between EU and non-EU countries, and especially US, right? Yeah. And through that Privacy Shield, and there were about 5,000 plus big customers doing that, right? And I think the Max Schrems, who kind of came up with the Schrems law, kind of saw this and said, hang on, if this data is the GDPR standards are higher on how the customer's data needs to be protected in Europe, but if it leaves Europe and goes into US or some other countries, they don't meet the same standards. So we cannot use this Privacy Shield to effectively bypass and GDPR and allow data to leave EU. So they effectively overturned that decision, and so they kind of killed the Privacy Shield provision with Schrems 2. So you cannot transfer data now, from an EU country to a non-EU country. And if you do that, if data has to, be in some other country or be in even in a US-owned company within the country, right? There's certain requirements. And there are two, and the three that you see here, but the two most important ones are all data that goes into that non-sovereign place has to be encrypted. So you have to encrypt all your data. And then you have to be in control of the keys, because a lot of times what happens is people encrypt the data in the cloud, as an example, CSP, but the keys are owned by the cloud provider. So it's like you don't have separation between the church and state. If they get compromised, you can effectively get they're in control of both things, right? So the idea is that you have to first encrypt your data, And secondly, the customer has to be in control of the keys. So even if that company either gets compromised or gets subpoenaed by the US government or any other governments, all they're giving up is encrypted bits, right? And because they can't do anything without it because the customer owns the keys. And then the third piece, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the context of VMware in the next slide, but is a very good best practice pseudonymization or obfuscation. So why this becomes important is because when you think about, talk about a layered onion, so encryption and control over keys, okay, that's a Schrems requirement. But I'm a healthcare provider and I have customer sensitive data, or I'm a bank and I have your PII data, your credit card numbers, etc. So those fields I want to obfuscate as well, right? Because a lot of times they are encrypted at rest, but they're not encrypted, in use. So if somebody does a memory scan, they can effectively get all that PII data, and that's why a lot of the attacks happen. So pseudonymization is a very, very important piece. And so these are the three elements of best practices that I think anybody should use.
Pseudonymization is the first time I've kind of come across that. Is that similar to tokenization, or is it a different thing?
Yeah, the most generally used word is tokenization.
Okay.
Or obfuscation.
Yeah.
Sometimes people also call it data masking, but there is a very important difference between data masking and tokenization. Data masking is hiding certain fields, but that's not encryption. So you can still, that's just one way to show you mask certain things. Whereas tokenization uses format preserving encryption. So you're actually encrypting that PII field, and if you need to get it back, you can decrypt it using mathematical formulas. So it's a big difference. But yes, so pseudonymization is tokenization.
Okay. So obviously, then you guys in Fortanix have seen a huge growth then in demand for key management services off the back of Schrems 2, I expect.
It's been a huge, clearly, in general. I mean, what we are seeing is that, and if you just, and I use the slide and I don't have it here, but if you look at the number of new laws that are coming up on the privacy side on a yearly basis. So, of course, GDPR and Schrems 2 Europe was furthest ahead. Then, US has laws within states like CCPA. New York just passed a law. Colorado passed a law recently. India passed laws. Australia has a new law. So Japan has their law. So everybody has certain sovereignty laws now, and they want you to kind of protect the data based on those requirements, right? So this requires customers then really at a minimum having to do these three basic things, if not more. And for us, of course, we provide a platform that allows you to kind of, protect your data through its entire life cycle, whether it's on-prem or, whether you're going into cloud or, into a cloud service provider. So. Yeah.
And speaking of cloud service providers, then, do you want to cover how, the sovereign cloud solution from Fortanix fits into the VMware cloud provider framework? Yeah,
absolutely. So, look, I mean, we've had a strong relationship with VMware over the last 3 years. We started this journey many years ago, so that's been great. And clearly, we have a large, as you said earlier, VMware is in pretty much most of the enterprise customers, across the globe. And so it is a very key use case for us in most of the enterprise customers. And so again, in the context of VMware, like if you look at how should a customer think about protecting, the data? So first and foremost, if I use Schrems 2 or any kind of privacy law as an example, you need to have an HSM in which you have your keys, because that's a government standard. So most customers require that your keys are inside HSM. Now, in our case, we have even a higher standard because our HSM also runs inside something called confidential compute. And that's even more important. And VMware, of course, supports confidential compute with the ESX7 or vSphere 7 and above, right?
Just to interrupt you there. So for the non-security buffins amongst us, what does HSM stand for?
Hardware Security Module.
Okay.
Right? Okay. And the whole idea is that it's a NIST certified standard, government standard, and you're required by law for at least regular industries to put your keys inside of an HSM, right? So it's got very high standards. So in regular industries, you have to have an HSM on which you have your keys. We also run it inside of HSM runs inside of something called confidential compute. Why that's important is also it makes it subpoena proof, right, from a cloud service provider. And I'll touch on that in the next slide.
Yeah.
Then, of course, so that allows customers to control their key lifecycle. You want to leverage that to encrypt at a base level, encrypt your VMs, right? Encrypt your vSAN. So you're at least protecting that with keys that you control, which is the BYOK, right, into your sovereign clouds from keys that you control. So that's at the kind of infra layer. And then, of course, on top of that infra, you're running, on vSphere, you're running databases like Oracle, SAP, MongoDB, other things. Inside, for databases, and I'll just use an example, like an Oracle, you have something called transparent data encryption that you also want to encrypt all the fields in the database, right? So you can encrypt the database and you need keys for that. And again, you want to be in control of those keys. And then you can go a step further that before you encrypt everything in a database, the certain fields like your PII fields or your AH fields or your social security numbers, you want to tokenize that and then encrypt them. And why is that important? This is because if you encrypt everything, then why does it matter? Well, it matters because when you encrypt something at rest and then you bring it into memory, you unencrypt it because you want to do something with it, right?
Yeah.
Your tokenized data will still then be exposed over there. And typically that's when most of the hacks happen, right? So somebody will break into your server, will scan your memory, and they'll find all this PII data or they'll find credentials, right? And then they'll bounce around from there. So, but if you obfuscate all that data, even if they were to scan the memory, they would only get obfuscated, PII, social security data, right? So that becomes very important. So you have best practice, you have to tokenize and encrypt. And then you talked about Tanzu earlier, but we also provide a secrets management functionality, which allows you to, so let's say if you're doing CI/CD, which VMware, the whole Tanzu services offers, right? You want to, people are saving credentials all over the place, right? You want to make sure your credentials get saved inside of an HSM or get saved inside of a SGX, so that again, because commonly that's where things get hacked. I get a credential to something and I'll take it and I'll run with it, right? Second thing is you've got like Tanzu secrets, like in Kubernetes, you have secrets. You want to make sure those secrets can also be HSM backed. And we also provide provisions for that, right? So that if somebody kind of compromises your container, they don't get access to your secrets, right? The secrets are sitting inside of HSM. So these are, I just gave you 2 layers, but we have a full portfolio of services that a CSP can offer, or can talk to the customers about. And of course, most large or most customers of VMware are going to be using most of these services.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, from a cloud provider perspective, then you can offer sort of several different kind of base services, bring your own keys, a HSM as a service, perhaps. What about the kind of the resiliency? Because how does that kind of work with the HSM layers that you guys put in?
Yeah, and so maybe if you go to the next slide, it's a great slide, and I can talk about it and show it now. But if you look on the right here, the way, so we Fortanix has we have a SaaS offer, and we also have an on-prem offer. So in an on-prem offer, an example that you're seeing here. So in this specific example, let's assume you're a CSP, and you have multiple data centers. Mm-hmm. So we kind of follow the cloud model. So even in our the appliances that a CSP would deploy, the HSMs, they get deployed in a cluster, in a minimum of 3, and typically there'll be, could be max of whatever, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, it doesn't matter. So and they run in a clustered format. So in this case, you can see there's 2 in one data center, 1 on the other. So even if somebody hacks into one or tries to kill one, or one goes down, you've got 2 others that the data is synchronized with, right? So it's all synchronized amongst the entire cluster. So any one node going on, any 2 nodes going down are not going to have any impact, right?
That's providing sort of complete resilience then for a key management service to either a single tenant or multiple tenants from a single or multiple for resilience HSM devices. And this goes a lot further than the customer could really do themselves practically. I mean, the cloud provider is going to have the environments, the regions, all under sovereign control, replicating between them. That's hard enough, but standing up multiple key management services and HSMs in those regions, replicating and providing resiliency out the box, that's quite a feat.
Yeah, look, and we've made it really simple, guys. So let's take this example here, and this is kind of how would this all work, right? So firstly, and we have a live, we are working with CSPs in the VMware, right, that have got the service live, and effectively our service is a multi-tenanted service. So once the service is set up by the CSP, then they can expose, with their brand, they would expose that portal to the customer, and they can self-sign up and create a trial account, or they can work through CSP and get an account, right? But it's a fully multi-tenanted services. And what happens typically is that the customer is running inside of the CSP, like in this example. They have sensitive workloads that they want to protect. They would sign up through that portal. They would create their own keys. Those keys are inside the HSM, and then they would connect those, their keys, or use those keys to encrypt their workloads, that are running inside of the CSP's data center or on their cloud, depending on the CSP configuration. And those keys, again, are sitting inside of a sovereign boundary, as we talked about, sitting, which means the HSMs are sitting in a sovereign boundary, the keys are sitting inside of the HSM, and the keys are controlled by the customer. Now, even if the government was to come in, or if the cloud provider wanted to go and try to get access to the keys, there's no way they can get access to the keys, right? Because it is subpoena proof, because it runs inside of SGX, right? So nobody can see the keys. And secondly, it runs inside HSM. So it's got multiple levels of protection kind of built in to meet the highest levels of compliance standard, right? And then the customers can deploy this in multiple, kind of formats, right? They can have a dedicated format, or they can, have a shared format. It's up to them in working with the CSP, but it's really, really easy.
Yeah. So just considering the normal sort of scenario for customers where they have multiple clouds today, some in hyperscalers, some on their prem, some in the service provider. In the sovereign domain, then the cloud provider can offer this as a service, completely segregated from the outside world.
That's right. But
for a customer that has also a requirement to manage keys, perhaps for hyperscaler workloads, can you said Fortanix also runs a SaaS service, so can you integrate those together and provide, the different domain kind of level controls to the sovereign domain and the public domain? Absolutely. So, but I'll make it even simpler. And yes, you can do that. But in most cases, what happens is, even with CSPs, and practically having worked with some of the CSPs, right? They themselves will provide. So we already have the functionality built into the product, and it's called cloud. We call that functionality cloud data control. So and most CSPs know that customers may be running a certain amount of data inside of their the CSP's cloud or the CSP's infrastructure, right? If they're a colo provider, but then they will also have keys into, let's say, Google or AWS or somewhere else, because they've got some certain workloads running there. So the cloud data control feature can be just run out of the same portal for the customer, the same account, right? And the beauty is that we sell these as kind of tiered services. So for a CSP, they would just provide, like, let's say, key management as a service. They would provide tokenization as the next layer of service. They could provide cloud data control as the next level of service. So there's a lot of they can add additional revenue for them, and also provide very seamless functionality that the customer can get out of the same account, out of the same experience, right? They don't need to go anywhere else. They don't need to do anything else. Okay, cool. Well, speaking about revenue, then, shall we move on to a customer kind of example, and how this kind of, we've explained the tiering of services and the options to sell the portfolio of services that are available. How's this worked in a kind of a real example that you can walk through? Yeah, look, I mean, again, I just picked a customer. This is a financial services customer, a very large customer of VMware, thousands of VMware VMs and vSANs, and then they run a very large installation of Oracle databases. So
so they, again, being in the financial services space, they're regulated. They have to have a HSM backed environment. Everything has to be encrypted. Everything has to be tokenized. So again, in working with the CSP, they were able to effectively get a solution that allows them to, what we just showed in the last two slides, right? In that option that they can go into Fortanix portal through a CSP, get the keys to effectively encrypt their vSAN and vSphere instances. And then beyond that, they were also doing transparent data encryption for the Oracle databases. And then, of course, looking at tokenization. So these are all, again, upsell opportunities. So for a CSP, right, it's not just base level service, vSAN, and vSphere encryption. Then additionally, selling, transparent data encryption, then selling tokenization. And then above that, if the customer, let's say they have a CI/CD chain with, let's say, Tanzu services, and that, so they may need secrets management for that, or they need multi-cloud. So again, they can just keep selling additional things that allows them to, continue to monetize that and add more value for the customers, right? Both from a compliance and security perspective. So I thought this was a good example.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, obviously offering a sovereign cloud service, number one, is what we're here to talk about today. And that's obviously something that the service providers monetize already. But having that ability to kind of layer on those key management services with an ecosystem partner that plugs in, integrates, out of the box kind of compliance and reporting and capabilities you're going to get, that's, a significant gain for a cloud provider to jumpstart their key management services and start offering customers, unique things like bring your own keys, I think. Okay, then. So just to wrap up in the interest of time, I just thought I'd cover, a brief slide to tell providers how they can find out more about sovereign cloud. VMware's been creating assets to support sovereign clouds, and we've got over 40 technical papers collated into our technical guidance document, which addresses 21 of the requirements around the sovereign cloud designation. So that's covering data sovereignty, jurisdictional control, data access integrity, security, compliance, independence and mobility as well, and interoperability. There are also a bunch of white papers on our cloud solutions site. The web address is there. All really help cloud providers understand what is the architecture that VMware is talking about. What are the opportunities with our ecosystem providers? We've now got an ecosystem section. So, Fires, Fortanix is up there. Rajiv, like you said, Cloudium, Veeam. These are solutions that can really, they plug into our environment. They're probably the quickest way to get those particular functions working in your cloud environment today, tried and tested with hundreds of thousands of customers globally, and really complements the sovereign cloud initiative that we've discussed today. Okay, well, just remains to say thank you, Fires, for joining today and your time presenting and talking about Fortanix and Shrems too. Your knowledge has been a real education for me. I've enjoyed it a lot. Thank you. And Rajiv, thank you for your introduction to sovereign cloud and explaining to everyone the key principles and levers and areas to sovereign cloud that VMware is looking at. Any just last point of action that you want to call out before we close?
Just look, first step, and a big thanks to you and Rajiv for the partnership. We are clearly very excited, and I think we would love to, see how we can work closely with the CSPs to, kind of enable them, educate them more about, how they could bring more value to their customers, right? Really in achieving compliance and hopefully also them kind of driving more revenue.
Thanks, Fayaz. And Rajiv?
Yeah, I echo that. Fayaz, thank you, first of all, for the partnership, and Guy for giving us an opportunity to share our VMware sovereign cloud solution in partnership with Fortanix. A key thing that we see in the marketplace is there's a pull in the market. There's a demand for sovereign clouds by the end customers. From a VMware perspective, we are committed. As you can see, right, we are seeing momentum in the marketplace. We have now 14 cloud providers. We continue to innovate, right? We're moving beyond infrastructure to developer and data services. We have Tanzu application platform, Tanzu data services, and stay tuned for, as we bring more and more services. And then, of course, right, we are committed to our ecosystem partners, bringing the best of solutions, right? Be it object storage or key management or ransomware protection, right? So we are very excited, and, we look forward to, working with you closely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Ditto to that. Fayaz, Rajiv, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.